The birth of planet system that was revealed by condensed matter physics. The birth of planet system depends on the property of substance. Introduction. It is difficult to observe planets at the place where a lighting is absent. The traditional theory did not describe about the forming process of planets that occurred before beginning of nuclear fusion in center star. State of high temperature is not necessary for beginning of planet formation. Chemical reaction of vapored metals occurs even at low temperatures. The lower energy of state can be achieved by a short-range force. Substance is configured from atoms by Coulomb force of electronic interactions. The short-range force is 36th power of 10 times strong compared with gravitational force. But the atoms must approach closely within about 1 angstrom. Hydrogen is the most difficult material to gather by the gravity. A central star must collect huge amount of interstellar matter. So, long time is required for hydrogen nuclear fusion in the star. Water or carbon connects interstellar materials. Those form a comet-like planet. The enlargement of chunks of interstellar matter realizes a noticeable gravitation. Increase of the mass of planet of ice changes to the gas planet that holds hydrogen molecules by its gravitational force. According to explanation of traditional planet formation theory, planets were formed by collision of meteorites in the universe. But, two rocks do not unify by gravitational force at collision in the universe. It is difficult to collect interstellar matter without accumulated gravitational force. Protostar begins to grow to large size by short-range force. The integration brings the lower energy state than isolated state. A large amount substance gathered by a short-range force realize low energy states of substance. Hydrogen is abundant in space. But hydrogen is the most difficult material to gather by gravitational force. The large-size protostar that holds hydrogen molecules holds every material. So, the gas planet accelerates the speed of growth. Such center star forms a solid core in the center, as shown in Figure 1. The hydrogen atom and inner layer of supergiant gas planet will be extremely compressed. Under such compressed state, nuclear fusion happens via interactions between protons by very short-range strong force. Blast of solid core takes place due to the kinetic energy that was increased rapidly by chain of nuclear fusion. Asteroids and meteorites scattered at the explosion. Meteorites were formed as the core in planet. Most of meteorites were provided by center star at the burst of the core that was caused by a nuclear fusion of hydrogen. Many extrasolar planets possessing large size with elliptic orbit have been discovered. The question is how to form the elliptical orbit of giant planet. There are two cases. One is the large planet that was born in the other place. The invasion on a central star's gravitational area is able to change its route to the elliptical orbit due to swing by. It is also possible to realize a giant planet with elliptical orbit by collision of two giant planets, because one of the planet may begin nuclear fusion at the collision. Center of gravity on binary star system is possible to keep position after the self-explosion. The acceleration vector of every planet will have both centripetal and tangential components. The velocity vector in the elliptical orbit is always tangent to the orbit. In case that the centripetal force does not change, the eccentric planet will continue the rotation. Existence of large eccentric planets indicates the possibility that there were large planet at the beginning of nuclear fusion of the other star. An extrasolar planet hot Jupiter. Pegasi 51 star is the first discovered extrasolar planet. Mass of the planet is a half Jupiter's. Here, mass of Jupiter is 318 times the mass of the Earth. The solid core of Jupiter is twice size of Earth. Orbit of Pegasi 51 star is 7.5 million kilometers away from the central star. It is shorter than Sun synchronous orbit of 25.3 million kilometers. The position of the planet so-called hot Jupiter seems on the verge of merging with central star. Just before the coalescence, proto-center star inhale hydrogen gas from the other planet. The planets are approaching each other by gravitational force before explosion of center star. But after nuclear reaction in the center star begins, the planets are moved away from the center star After nuclear reaction begins, the radiant heat heats their gas molecules. Those gas were diffused in the universe. The gas planet continues releasing gas until it lost the gas, because the gravitation of the planet decreases through release of the gas. Formation of ice planets and gas planets. The process of growth on each planet can be estimated from today's state of our solar system. That is, the state of outer planets is the state of primitive, and the state of inner planets will be the newer state. Temperature is not an essential condition to form a comet or a planet. The initial environment of the planet formation is interstellar molecular clouds. Water molecules or carbon atoms are able to mediate bonding of interstellar substances. Those substances form comet or ice planet. Neptune and Uranus are giant ice planets. The planet with large mass collects hydrogen molecules. So, a giant ice planet grows to a giant gas planet. Saturn and Jupiter are giant gas planets. Atmosphere of terrestrial planets. The temperature at high density of substance becomes high. The heat source for forming a layered structure of the planet is the condensed materials. Iron metal was gathered into the center of planet, and rocks of the crust is formed around them. Terrestrial planets are orbiting at high speed in the environment of dense hydrogen gas. It affects for the planets to accumulate hydrogen molecules. But, carbon dioxide and water molecules were included in the planets. Nuclear fusion of the sun causes solar wind and radiant heat. Those release hydrogen gas from the planets. The terrestrial planets continue releasing gas until it lost the gas, because the gravitation of the planet decreases through release of the gas. Orbit of terrestrial planet becomes far from the sun. Synchronous orbit of the sun is 25 million kilometers away from the sun. This distance is almost half of the distance between Mercury and Sun, that is 58 million kilometers. That is, terrestrial planets rotate at outside of synchronous orbit around the sun. Asteroid belt and late heavy bombardment. Asteroid belt is from 300 million kilometers to 600 million kilometers away from the sun. It is located between Mars 230 million kilometers and Jupiter 778 million kilometers. Meteorites in the asteroid belt are solids. Those solids are formed at highly compressed state in center of large planet, and those are produced by explosion of the core. Following scenario is proposed under the assumption that a large gas planet existed in the asteroid belt. The planet in the asteroid belt continued growing after beginning of nuclear fusion in the sun. The solid core was broken to pieces by the kinetic energy caused by the nuclear fusion. The gas planet was disappeared after the explosion due to its small size. A part of broken pieces have orbited along the asteroid belt, because the orbital radius is determined by the balance of the centripetal force of substances. Gas and dust lost centrifugal force by collision with hydrogen gas. So, those were absorbed into the sun. At 3.8 billion years ago, the late heavy meteorite bombardment on planets of solar system took place. It may have been caused by explosion of the gas planet in the asteroid belt. Meteorite crash and heat source of inner planet. The substance in a limited area is heated by meteorite crash. But the energy of heat on the substance is absorbed by the expansion and immediately after. Addition of meteorite increases of mass of planet. It causes downsize of inner materials. Downsize of material causes increase of potential energy and kinetic energy. Heat source of internal planet is condensation of matter. The gravitational potential energy from Newtonian mechanics was considered as the heat source of interior of the Earth. The formula is given by equation 1. Inserting the values m, r, and g, we get the value as equation 2. Assuming that heat capacity of the Earth is 0.25 calorie over centigrade, the energy corresponds to temperature rise of 35,000 centigrade. Similar calculations were carried out. As for Mars, it is 7,200 centigrade. As for the Moon, it is 1,600 centigrade. Gravitational interactions between Earth and Moon. The Moon gets from 3 centimeters to 3.8 centimeters further away from Earth every year. Assuming it had been continued 4.5 billion years ago, the accumulated value is from 135,000 km to 171,000 km. The primitive Moon stayed in the Earth's gravitational sphere at 4.5 billion years ago. The distance to the boundary where gravitational force from the Sun is equal to that from the Earth can be calculated by using the Newton's law of universal gravitation. It is 260,000 kilometers, as shown in equation 3. On the other hand, distance between the Moon and the Earth is 384,000 kilometers. This value is far from the Earth's gravitational sphere. In order to make the gravitational boundary of the Moon sure, the ratio of gravitational forces from the Earth and from the Sun is 0.46, as shown in equation 5. Gravitational force from the Sun to the Moon is about 2 times strong than from the Earth to the Moon. Gravitational boundary between the Mars and the Sun, and Martian satellites. Near synchronous orbit maintains a fixed position relative to the other substances. So, the synchronized orbit makes possible to make a cluster of interstellar materials. The Mars has 2 tiny natural satellites, Phobos and Deimos. Radiuses of orbit on Mars's satellites are as follows. Radius of orbit on Phobos is 9.4 thousand kilometers, period is 0.32 days. Synchronous orbit of Mars is 20,000 kilometers, period is 1.02 days. Radius of orbit on Deimos is 23,000 kilometers, period is 1.26 days. Here, the distance to the boundary where gravitational force from the Sun is equal to that from Mars was calculated by using Kepler's third law, as indicated by equation 6. The value on the Mars is 129,000 kilometers. Martian satellites exist inside of this Mars gravitational sphere. Phobos and Deimos are almost circular orbit. As for both satellites, rotation period is equal to its orbital period. Such states were achieved through the tides of Mars. The Phobos' reddish spectrum has been suggested that it has a composition of organic rich silicates. Deimos is composed of rock rich in carbonaceous material, like carbonaceous chondrite meteorites. Satellites those were formed within gravitation of Jupiter, and satellites those were captured by Jupiter. As shown in figure 7, there are 4 satellites, Metis, Adraste, Amalthea, Thebe, with a thin ring of dust particles. Those exist near synchronous orbit of Jupiter of 160,000 kilometers far from Jupiter. Those satellites are rock satellites. These rocky satellites are formed under the conditions with a high speed of orbiting satellite in environment of high density of hydrogen molecules around the Jupiter. So, these rings were formed from dust particles. There are 4 large Galilean satellites. Those satellites are orbiting at outside of the synchronized orbit. Among them, Io is characterized by violent volcanic activities. Europa possesses a liquid water ocean underneath the ice. Ganymede is configured with the iron core and with mantle rocks beneath the crust of ice. Callisto is configured with ice and rack. The orbit of these satellites is nearly circular, and its orbital inclination is close to 0 value. These satellites of Jupiter are similar to the planets of the solar system. These facts support the idea that the Sun and planets of the solar system were formed concurrently. Many small irregular-shaped satellites those are rotating along opposite direction of the rotation of Jupiter are widely distributed in the Jupiter system. Those were captured by Jupiter. The value of the boundary on gravitational force from Jupiter to the Sun is 24 million kilometers, as shown in equation 8. Formation of rings of Saturn. Compositions of Saturn's ring are ices and rock fragments. All these rings are located inside of the synchronous orbit of Saturn. That is 112,000 kilometers far from Saturn, as indicated in equation 10. A planet of intermolecular bond gradually collapses to pieces, due to tidal force from equatorial plane, in case that it goes into within the gravitational area on the Saturn planet. Since the ring loses the tidal forces, the relative distance among constituents of a ring will keep for a long time. Satellite Enceladus is a planet covered in ice water. It is located away from Saturn in distance of 238,000 kilometers. Satellite Titan is located away from Saturn in distance of 1.22 million kilometers. This environment realizes 1.6 times of Earth's atmosphere. There are clouds, rivers and lakes in this satellite are made from methane. However, Titan's surface temperature is -180 centigrade. Most satellite of Saturn exists within the gravitational area of Saturn. The value of length on the boundary of gravitational force from Saturn to the Sun is 24 million kilometers given by equation 11. Formation of Uranus's rings. Synchronous orbit of Uranus is nearly the same size as the orbit of Neptune. The value is 83,000 kilometers. As shown in Figure 10, most rings of Uranus are rotating within the range from 26,000 kilometers to 70,000 kilometers. Here, gravitational boundary from Uranus to the Sun is 19 million kilometers away from Uranus. The compositions of Jupiter's ring are made from debris of satellite. Those were produced by meteorite crash or due to tidal forces of the Roche limit. There is Mu ring at the outside of synchronous orbit. There is a MAB satellite in a gap of the Mu ring. The radius of orbit is 98,000 kilometers. This state was formed by two steps of processes. At first, the Mu ring was made. After that, the gap in the ring is formed by the gravitational pull of the MAB. Neptune satellites, and tidal effects on Triton. As shown in Figure 11, there are rings around the Neptune within the range from 41,000 kilometers to 63,000 kilometers. All these rings exist within the geostationary orbit of 83,000 kilometers. Triton is a big Neptune's planet 355,000 kilometers away. Here, a gravitational boundary to the Sun is 33 million kilometers away from Neptune. It is orbited with opposite direction on Neptune's rotation. Triton's orbital axis different with the Neptune's rotational axis. Those facts indicate that Triton had been captured by the Neptune. Today's state of Triton is caused by tide effects. There are evidences. That is, Triton's orbit is circular, rotation of Triton and orbital of Triton are synchronized, disappearance of crater on the surface of Triton. Conclusions. Extrasolar planets contributed to build a unified theory of planet formation. Also, satellites formed near the gas planets in the solar system were helpful in order to clarify the process of the birth of the planet. There are facts to support the theory that planets were born together with primitive star. Newton's law of universal gravitation plays a major role in the planetary system. But, effects of gravity can be ignored in chemical reaction. The birth of stars and planets, satellites, can be understood basing on microscopic quantum mechanics and classical mechanics for macroscopic effects. Electrons exist around the nucleus. Satellites exist around the planet. Planets exist around the central star. The quantum mechanics describes the steady state, where potential energy and kinetic energy are equilibrium. In equilibrium state of a condensed matter, increase of potential energy accompanies with increase of the kinetic energy. Universal gravitation works clearly by cooperation on a huge chunk formed by huge number of atoms. A solid core is formed in the center of giant planet, because it accumulates every interstellar material. The core explodes at nuclear fusion of hydrogen in the center star, and fragments of the core were emitted around. Most of meteorites are formed by this reaction. Terrestrial planets had collected interstellar materials before beginning of the nuclear fusion of center star. The terrestrial planet was changed by nuclear fusion and explosion of core in the center star. Thank you for your kind attention.